All right. Hi, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Double A Team Podcast. I'm your host, Stephen Nagishi, and joining me today, it is a special occasion. Uh, I've had the previous guests before to talk about the Cubs, but I am so excited to discuss the 2024 Cubs with somebody that I think, if you're a Cubs fan, that you follow closely on social media, that you probably know these two people. Joining me is the lead writer for the cubbiescrib.com. It is Alex Patt making his second returning appearance. And for the first time, I am very honored and excited to have this gentleman all the way from the West Coast area. It is Michael Ernst. I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly, Michael, there. So
you are
there, who used to be a lead writer for the Cubs then, but now he is still very much active on Twitter when it comes to all things Chicago Bears. Gentlemen, thank you very much for your time. I'm so honored that the time and date really aligned for both of you to join us tonight. Alex, welcome back. How are you tonight?
I'm doing good. Thanks for having me again, and hope you're doing well as well.
Michael, first time. Thanks for joining me. And how you been so far this week?
Oh, it's been pretty good. Can't complain too much.
Yes, indeed. And, we got a lot to talk about the Chicago Cubs and the baseball season so far, all things considered. And let's get right to it. We can't complain too much about the Chicago Cubs so far, in the 2024 season. But, let's start with the first and foremost, the Chicago Cubs so far and Craig Counsell. We know Craig Counsell, came over from the Milwaukee Brewers on a big contract and forcing to part ways with the incumbent David Ross, who we all know was a very popular player back in the day. But as a manager, we all had our doubts and questions because of his lack of experiences and everything so far. But Alex, let's start with you. How would you grade Craig Counsell so far? And is there anything else that, you, Michael, and even the fans of the Cubs should be concerned with or encouraged with what we've seen out of Craig Counsell so far?
So, obviously there are a lot of moves that we've seen Craig Counsell make that are a bit arbitrary, but I think overall, you got to give him an A so far, considering where their record is and just considering how many injuries this team has had. You lost your ace day one of the season. You lost Seiya Suzuki, who was your MVP at the time. And then you lost Cody Bellinger for some time, who is arguably your most important run producer on the team. So the fact that he's been able to keep this ship going, and on the fact that the bullpen has been very faulty, and he's had to manage through that. So, I mean, it's kind of been a baptism by fire for Craig Counsell on the north side, with just all these obstacles he's had to, endure. And keep in mind this too, they've had a tough schedule. You had to go to Texas, you had to play the Dodgers. Say what you will about the Padres, I think they're a decent team. And then you're going to have to play Atlanta twice over the next week or so. So,
right.
He's had a challenging start to his MLB tenure with the Chicago Cubs after coming over from the Brewers. But I got to give him a lot of credit for, keeping the ship going as well as it is. And, again, you can dissect a lot of things that he's done, a lot of decisions that he's made. But overall, I think you're seeing why he was one of the most popular names out there in terms of managerial candidates this offseason. I can say with fair confidence that, some average or below average manager wouldn't quite be at this level, even though, sure, there's been a little luck involved here and there, but that's baseball. And the fact that Craig Counsell's been able to maximize a few things when you could, I got to give him a lot of props for that.
Michael, how would you assess Craig Counsell's performance so far with all the bullpen issues and the injuries and everything? I know there are some moments where you're like, what has he done? So, question so far. But overall, do you feel like you're fairly high on him as well?
Yeah, A plus. I mean, I don't know how you could really fault anything he's done other than a few moves here or there. But no manager's ever going to be perfect. And just piggybacking off of what Alex was saying, the injuries, and not just the injuries, but like, your veteran starting pitcher just completely falling apart and literally being the worst pitcher in baseball.
Right.
A guy that you were counting on was completely unpitchable. And then on top of that, your closer, who was fairly reliable last year when he was healthy, has again been completely unpitchable. I mean, these aren't guys that are struggling with like, a 4.5 ERA or a 5 ERA. Like you literally can't even pitch them in games sometimes. It's been that hard of a decline or bump in the road, hopefully for both of them, where that we can get them both right. But yeah, considering having a couple of guys be on the roster that you couldn't use, and a third of the roster being called up from AAA, I really can't fault any. And just being over 500 is frankly a miracle given the obstacles that have been in the Cubs' way so far. And
yeah, they've had a lot of issues, and it's a miracle that the Cubs are where they are right now, and they're still way up there in the standings with the Milwaukee Brewers, which is really, really surprising and kind of ironic that they're still as good as they are without Craig Counsell.
Yeah, and I think you got to give the Brewers a lot of props as well, because they've had literally almost the identical injuries that the Cubs have had. Their closer's been out. A couple of their starting pitchers have been out. Their former MVP's been out. That sort of thing. It's almost mirror images between the two teams.
That's true. So let's get to the issue that is at hand with the Cubs right now, and of course, that is the first and foremost, the number one pressing issue right now is the bullpen. We all know it. It sucks. When and how they will fix the bullpen issue is on the minds of everybody right now. So, Alex, let's start with you. Given the current situation right now with the Cubs bullpen, how do you assess it right now, and what is a realistic option that you would like to see the Cubs and Jed Hoyer, fix this bullpen?
So I was listening to the radio the other day, and on 670 The Score, they made a great point, and I think this is very true when evaluating the bullpen. Your trust level with the bullpen kind of just comes down to some pitches. Like, for example, Mark Leiter Jr., when he comes in, what are we looking at him to throw? The splitter, right? I mean, that's the pitch he gets out with. You look at El Monte, the way he can throw a fastball when it's in the zone, and then a slider. I mean, that's kind of what you trust. And then you look at some of the other relievers in the bullpen, you're like, okay, Hector Neris has a great splitter when he executes, but he's still putting two guys on every single outing he's in there. Whether it's 2 walks, a walk, and a hit, it's never clean. It's absolutely never clean. And the fact of the matter is, it's not sustainable. You can't keep going into a 1 or 2 run game, put 2-3 guys on, and expect to get out every single time. I mean, he's gotten lucky to have gotten out of virtually every single big situation, but that's going to blow up at your face at some point. And you see when he does lock in and when he does throw that splitter, it's nasty. So you're like, where can that consistency be? And one of the issues is when you're not locating and getting ahead and you're constantly falling behind. Well, then it's easier to lay off a splitter when you're already ahead in the count and you don't want to chase anything. When you're behind in the count and you have to try to foul things off and make contact, you're more willing to chase a splitter down below. But those first few batters, he doesn't get ahead. So, he's been the closer for the past 2-3 weeks now, but I don't think that's a long-term solution if he keeps doing this. So I like the idea of calling teams like the Marlins and seeing what they have to offer. Unfortunately, at this point in the season, whether or not you strike a deal, it's a little iffy. It is a little iffy. So you might just have to go in-house and see what you can kind of cobble together. Because truly, I don't think you can have much of a definitive role. I think you need to let the game itself dictate how you're going to manage getting those last 6-9 outs of a game. I mean, there just might be the point where it's like, hey, listen, Here comes a few lefties. It's the 8th inning. Bring in Mark Leiter Jr. Okay, it's the 8th inning. There's a guy on. We need a little velocity or we need a ground ball. Let's bring in Almani to try to, have a running fastball or a slider away go in. So this is a situation where I think you have to let the game and the situation itself dictate itself until you can find a solution to bring other arms in here. It's really a difficult task for Craig Counsell, but that's why they're paying him the big bucks right now.
Mm-hmm. Michael, Alex mentioned the Marlins. Obviously, Marlins already have kind of given up on the season, as much, their general manager has indicated their season is already over. And obviously the popular name that the Marlins have right now is reliever Tanner Scott, who is a former Orioles reliever who is now with the Marlins. Unfortunately, he's walked about 14 batters in 13 innings of work so far, and the Marlins being as bad as they are, that's still a number that really concerns, because we as Alex mentioned, Hector Neris and the others just keeps on walking. When you look at a guy like Tanner Scott, are you confident that the Cubs can do their due diligence and make sure that if and when they get a guy like Scott, who's been effective in the past but has been somewhat ineffective and wild this year, that the Cubs are getting their money's worth and they can fix what is the problem with Scott and maybe any other bullpen arm they get later this year?
I mean, in regards to Scott, he's really only had one good season in his career, and that was last year. Every other year he has had bad control bordering on horrible control. He's always walked a lot of guys, and it's led to a lot of runs in most of his seasons. Last year, he put it all together. This year, his control has been as bad as it has ever been, judging by the numbers. I can't say that I've watched all of his innings, so I can only go based off of the numbers right now. But given his history, I don't think that it's something that you can have much faith in that the Cubs or anyone could really fix him, because he's been in multiple organizations. Nobody's ever really fixed him. I think you're probably looking at last year as more of just a fluke as opposed to, him really figuring something out. And if that's the case, I'm not giving up much to get him.
Yeah.
I floated the idea on Twitter a few days ago or whatever, and I was like, I don't mind taking a flyer on the guy, but I'm not giving up anything good to get him. If Florida wants to dump the money, Miami wants to dump the money, fine. I'll take that and give them a mid-tier prospect or whatever, and we can roll with it for a little while and see if it works. And if it doesn't work, then you got to get rid of him. If he continues to walk people at the same rate that he is, he's not a usable pitcher. So you can't pay so much for somebody like that you don't feel like you can get rid of him and move on from it. So I don't look at him as a cure-all. I just figure he's probably an arm that's actually available at this point in the season. Whereas, I think with most teams and in most situations, they're not willing to trade a reliever at this point. Or if they are, you have to way overpay to get him. Right. And I don't think the Cubs are in that situation yet. I think with some of their starting pitching getting healthy now, you are going to have the option of bringing Ben Brown out of the bullpen. You're going to be able to use Hayden Wesneski out of the bullpen. I think arguably those would be the two most talented arms that they would have in the bullpen.
Right.
And so I would look for a little while to see if one or both of those guys can kind of figure out a role and maybe help establish a bit of rhythm in the bullpen, and maybe better slot other guys into better roles. And then, we got to get Alzolay's slider fixed and his command fixed. And he has been a little better the last couple of times out. I know he blew a game the other day But it was off of a bunch of soft singles. He wasn't giving up the home run like he was earlier in the season. I've at least taken some encouragement out of that. Whether or not he ever regains the closer role, you at least got to get him back to the point where you can use him in a close game. And right now they can't. So,
right. Alex, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, to me, I think Brown and or Wesneski can really provide something. At least one of them needs to soak up the role that Merriweather filled, is the 6th, 7th bridge guy, so that if your starting pitcher only gives you 5, you can at least get the game to whether it's Almonte or Leiter, or if we can get Neris right as well. Alex was talking about the pitches that you can rely on. I mean, in theory, Alzolay's slider, Drew Smiley's curveball, Luke Little's sweeper, they all have something. It's just most of them have been having difficulty executing them consistently this year for whatever reason. And you just got to hope that, hey, we've weathered the storm better this year. That we had the same problems last year, and eventually the bullpen stabilized in May. This year it hasn't quite happened yet, but you hope that it's coming.
Alex, Ben Brown's name has been mentioned as a possible, in a closer role, because he has 2 pitches, fastball and a curveball, I believe, and that, it's obviously very, very late, too early in the season to start tinkering with another pitch, if at all. But do you like the idea of Ben Brown as a closer, or would you rather put him in the bullpen and just let somebody else, emerge, or wait until, maybe towards the trade deadline to figure out what closers and bullpen arms are available?
So a few weeks ago, I floated the idea of Ben Brown taking a 9th inning role. And I say 9th inning role because, kind of based on what we hear from Craig Counsell, is he doesn't always like the term closer. So I think that Ben Brown pitching in a 9th inning role is kind of the opportunity to say, hey, we're not giving you permanently for every save situation this role, but we're going to put you in this situation and kind of see what you can do. And I like the idea of Ben Brown because, I like his stuff, and I think you can generate some whiffs with that. And that's really the thing with Alzolay, is even when he's pitching a little bit better, and, we talked about the soft singles against the Brewers and everything, but I want a closer that gets whiffs. I want swings and misses. I don't want the ball being put in play. And I think Ben Brown has the stuff to generate some of those whiffs. And obviously it's a challenge because he's a young pitcher. And with young pitchers, you're going to have some growing pains. You're going to have some ups and downs. But I think overall, the book we have on Brown so far in the majors, it's a lot more good than bad. And we've seen him start. We've seen him come out of the bullpen. We've seen him pitch multiple innings. So, I think he would be a realistic candidate, just because if you look at the other pitchers, right now you can't trust Alzolay. Mark Leiter Jr., I love the guy, but I don't like him as a closer. I like him in the situations that call for him when needed best. Almonte's the kind of guy I like as a bridge, or kind of that, hey, it's the 7th inning. We need an inning and a third of scoreless. That's kind of where I like him. Not as much as a closer, because Almonte can get a little wild. When you see the run on the fastball, sometimes it does not get the strike zone and it misses quite a bit. So that's a bit risky there. And with Hayden Wesneski, I really like the way he's adjusted his game, because, you look at his starts, he's not piling up a bunch of strikeouts. He's getting some weak contact, and I really like that for a number of roles. But if that's the kind of pitcher he's going to be, I wouldn't want that as a 9th inning role per se. So I think Ben Brown would provide an interesting option to try, just based on the stuff he has, because truly in the 9th inning in a safe situation, especially in modern day baseball, I want to take away as much of the variance as possible. Don't let a weak ground ball find a hole. Don't let a chopper to the shortstop, skip off his glove. And you know what? Sometimes you make a good pitch and they're still able to put in play. Like I want to take away as much as that as possible and bring in as much swing and miss as possible. So that's kind of where I see it right now. There's no easy, surefire solution here that we could say, boom, that's it. I think you have to evaluate what kind of pitchers you have, what kind of pitches do they throw, what are their strengths and weaknesses, and what the situation is. And that's why bullpens are so hard to figure out, especially in modern day baseball when starters don't go as deep and there's all sorts of innings you need from the pen now. And, all around baseball, the idea for the late reliever is take away as much contact as possible. Don't let the ball get put in play. It's really challenging. It really is challenging. And, that's why you have to try a few things, but you have to do it with a thought process in mind. You don't just throw something at a wall and hope it sticks.
Yeah. So the issue now is obviously how and when they will fix, and they will eventually get that fixed. And the man in charge, of course, is Jed Hoyer. We all have our issues, angst towards Jed every time a bullpen blows a lead or lose a game, which have happened, unfortunately, far too frequent for, so early in the season. So the issue now, I want to pose this question to you guys, is that has Jed lost any benefit of the doubt, and how hot is his seat right now? And not only we have a bullpen issue, we have an offense that really struggles to hit. Yesterday against the Padres, they had one infield hit on Yan Gomes away from being a no-hitter. And the Cubs still lost the game, by the way, 3-0, which was nothing short of an embarrassment so far with the offense. And of course, it's Jed, who is the one who put this team together. He obviously failed miserably with the bullpen. Now he has to fix. He also has to figure out a way to generate offense. And I understand not all of it is on Jed, of course, but Michael, let's start with you. Where are you currently with the feeling of Jed's job security and how he has done? And do you think that this is probably his last season if the Cubs, God forbid, miss the playoffs again? Or do you feel like Jed has kind of reached his ceiling, even if the Cubs do win the division and get to the playoffs?
No. I don't expect Jed Hoyer to be fired. I don't really have too much of an issue with his performance. I do wish he would have done a little bit more for the bullpen.
Right.
I don't think you can anticipate something like the way Kyle Hendricks has pitched. I don't think you can anticipate the way Albert Alzolay has pitched. That's not something that I can hang on the general manager. That's not something that any general manager can predict. It's not. Nobody drops to a 12 ERA in Major League Baseball. It just doesn't happen like the way we've had with Kyle Hendricks. Even when he was struggling 2 years ago, he was still going, it was like a 4.77 ERA. Right. You can't predict that Albert Alzolay is going to give up 5 home runs in April when he only gave up 5 home runs the entire season last year. So some of the angst that I feel like Cubs fans are feeling right now towards Hoyer's performance, I think is unjustified, because it's bad luck to some degree. I would also argue against the fact that the Cubs offense is bad, because the Cubs offense is not bad, in my opinion. I actually think it's really good. I think fans in general underestimate just how bad offense is around Major League Baseball right now. People complain about, oh, this guy's hitting 240. 240 is above the Major League average right now. There are so many teams that have 2 or 3 or 4 guys that are hitting under 200 in their everyday lineup.
Yeah.
There are multiple teams with 3, 4, 5 guys that have a 250 on base percentage. The Cubs don't have any of that. I mean, a catcher, I guess, maybe. to some degree.
Yeah.
With the way Yan Gomes has fallen off. But and this is with a Cubs team that's suffered multiple injuries, including to their two best hitters. Even the guys that they brought up from AAA, it's still worked pretty well. Mervis has struggled, Madrigal struggled, a few things here and there, and it is starting to add up a little bit. But this is a team to me that wasn't designed to be the Dodgers this year. It's not. This is a team that's still in transition. I've brought it up a lot that we can argue of whether or not the Cubs should ever rebuild. I am of the opinion that they probably shouldn't ever have to go down that road.
Yeah.
But they did. And they did that. They made that decision 5 years ago. Now is not the time to abandon that. This is a team that is going to be relying on a lot of young players, not just in the lineup, but in the starting staff and in the bullpen. And part of the bullpen's problem is Luke Little, Daniel Palencia neither one of them have stepped up.
Yeah.
We're hoping Ben Brown and Hayden Wesneski can now do that. But, for the offense, Michael Busch has been fine. He's had a couple of ups and downs. Obviously, he had the big home run streak, but he's also had, some struggles the last week or so prior to that walk-off homer he hit. Yeah. PCA's been okay. He's had a few good games at the plate, but he's at least held down the fort in center field. Canario did pretty good when he came up in the limited opportunities he got.
Sure.
And so this isn't the team that was designed to win 95, 100 games. This is a team that's probably going to win 90 games, and that, we were hoping that was going to be good enough in a fairly bad National League Central. And I think one of the other points that we kind of touched on earlier, we haven't even played any of the NL Central teams, really. We've been facing the good teams in the other division for the most part.
Right.
And the one team in the National League Central that we did face was the other team that's leading the National League Central, the only good teams, essentially.
Yeah.
And we've had all of these struggles, all of these injuries, and we're still right there, first place or a half game back, whatever the heck it is right now. Yeah. The schedule is going to lighten up, and hopefully some of these issues get sorted out. And I fully expect the Cubs to be around 90, 92 victories probably at the end of the season. And depending on, what they do at the trade deadline,
sure.
I'm hoping somebody like Ben Brown or something can step up, but I fully expect that the Cubs closer at the end of the season is not somebody that's on the roster right now. They are going to address the bullpen at some point. To me, I haven't loved all of Jed Hoyer's decisions. Like, I wasn't a fan of bringing Kyle Hendricks back, but it's a 1-year deal. I can't really fault him that much for it too. It's not like it was a horrible idea to bring Kyle Hendricks back. I just wanted somebody that had more swing and miss. But he also doesn't set the budget. My frustration with the Cubs organization stems more from the Ricketts than it does from
right. The ownership is probably holding him back more so than anything else.
Right. So do I think Jed Hoyer is one of the best general managers in baseball? Probably not. I don't think he's holding the Cubs back from competing though, and. I think it's kind of like the David Ross situation we had last year, where I don't think David Ross was the worst manager in baseball. I don't think he was elevating the team any, but I had no problem with them bringing him back because most of the guys that you could have brought in were going to be very similar, where, okay, he's going to win some games, he's going to lose some games, whatever. They identified a guy in Counsell that, hey, this guy is a clear upgrade. Yeah. And if the Ricketts can go out and say, hey, we're going to convince, Friedman or somebody to come over to the okay, great. Yeah, let's do that. Great. I'll take that. But just to roll the dice on somebody else, I don't know. Hoyer's fine.
Alex, obviously I wanted to ask you about Hoyer, but also Michael mentioned about the ownership. He's having more problems with it. I wanted to give you your thoughts on Hoyer and the ownership as to if they're holding him back more so than anything else.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the ownership, they draw a line in the sand. And, is it like Oakland A's level, Milwaukee Brewers level, or any small market team? No, there's still a bigger payroll, not the biggest, but bigger. But they drew that line in the sand with the luxury tax. And will they go over it at the trade deadline? I think so. I think that if they're in the position, they will. But they're very conservative with the way they approach this because, in this off season during this transition, I think that they wanted to be mindful of how Jed Hoyer spends. And, I think Jed Hoyer he's done some things very well, like rebuild the farm system. I think that going out and getting Shota Imanaga was a really smart, good move.
That's one of the best contracts in baseball.
It really is. It's insane how good that how club friendly that deal is, and the results are better than what we could have imagined. And Hoyer ain't perfect, and there's some money sunken into lost causes. I mean, I was all for this move last year, but the Trey Mancini move that left you some dead money. You're looking at Kyle Hendricks. That very well could be a situation where you have to eat some money. The move that I just hated last year from Hoyer was Tucker Barnhart, and there was some money that was paid there. No disrespect to Tucker Barnhart as a man in his prime. He was a great defensive catcher. He hasn't been that guy in several years. He's had, he's been banged up and he's older, and that I'll never forget that. There were so many good backup catchers on the market, and they went with that. I'm like, come on, but he's got to work with. It's not like, hey, here's $1, but it's like, hey, you got some wiggle room, but you can't go over this line. And there are a few other teams out there that will, not a ton, but the thing that we look at the situation is, yeah, it's not a ton. But when you think of big market team, the Cubs are in that top 4. When you think of the Yankees and the Red Sox and the Dodgers, and then there's us. Like, we're part of that big 4, and the Dodgers have unlimited funds. And, the Yankees have kind of drawn some lines in the sand too. But I think, to be fair to the Steinbrenners, they've given out some pretty doozy contracts over the past 10 years. So I think that
pretty bad ones too.
Yeah. Remember Jacoby Ellsbury? Awful. One of the worst deals in recent baseball. So it's you're somewhat limiting yourself, but if that's what it's going to be, then you want to be as smart as possible with the way you're spending. And the issue with that is you're not going to hit 100% on every single move. You're also going to have some outliers. There's going to be guys that just kind of take a tumble. There's going to be guys that get hurt. That is the unfortunate nature of the beast. And you wish you had a little more wiggle room, because I think you could have bulletproofed that bullpen. If you could have brought in, say, like a David Robertson type on a 1-year deal, I was kind of pounding the table. Hey, David Robertson is old. He's still good. Yes. And you see what he's doing in Texas. He's pretty good. That cutter still moves and can be located pretty well. I can guarantee you right now, if you had David Robertson on the staff, you'd have 2 or 3 more wins. I can almost guarantee that. So that's where my biggest frustration is. In terms of the offense, you had 2 major injuries. And, I think Ian Happ is a much better hitter than he is right now. And we saw Dansby Swanson. He's been playing hurt again. And you can definitely tell that not only has that hurt his offense, but his defense too, with some of the footwork. When they said knee injury, I'm like, yeah, that tracks. So I think the offense will get back on track. I just kind of hope it's soon, because even though I have confidence it will, your high-paid guys got to hit. And Happ and Swanson the past 3-4 weeks have not hit. And you got to do better. You're being paid to do better, and eventually it's got to come around.
Yeah.
My guest tonight is Alex Patt, the writer for the Cubbies Crib, cubbiescrib.com, excuse me, and Michael Ernst, former lead writer for the Cubs Den, and still very much an active participant in the Twitter universe when it comes to all things Chicago Cubs. So, gentlemen, let's talk about the rotation. We've griped enough about the bullpen and just raises our blood pressure, but there is something to be really, really excited about this Cubs rotation so far. I'm posting the picture, excuse me, on bleachernation.com right now with the Cubs rotation. Of course, the ERA has slightly changed for Imanaga, after the Padres outing recently, as is with Wisniewski on the yesterday's game. But I got to say that this is a dream rotation right now that is good enough to compete, when the playoffs starts. And certainly the emergence of Assad is encouraging. Tyone has been very, very good, even though he got off to a slow start where he was on the DL and had been finally getting back into things, as is Steele, who just got back after that horrific injury he suffered on an opening night against the Rangers. Imanaga has been an evolution. Imanaga himself has still 5-0, and basically pretty much is the reason why the Cubs are afloat above 500. Wisniewski has been great as well. And you think about the Cubs rotation, we've talked about, Kyle Hendricks is getting another rehab start in Iowa, I believe. So which means Wisniewski will stay in the rotation for now. Jordan Wicks is also on IL with arm injury. We don't know the extent of that injury. It's always scary when somebody says it's an arm injury because you think, it's Tommy John or something. So, guys, I want to talk to you. If and when Kyle Hendricks does get back, how much of a leash do you think he should get? Do you give him like 3-4 starts? Michael, do you give him 3-4 starts to make a decision on Hendricks and his future?
I mean, it depends on how he pitches. If he pitches twice the way he did his first 4 starts, I think that's all you can give him. If he's going out there and giving you 5 innings and gives up 3 runs, I mean, that's not great, but you can survive with that for 3, 4, 5, 6 starts and see if he can maybe improve on that. But, you just hope he pitches well. I mean, if he can recover even 90% of what he did last year, you take that and you let him roll with it.
Yeah.
And I'll bring it up as well. As great as this rotation has been, Cade Horton's still out there. He's coming at some point this year. That's going to be their reinforcements for the rotation, during the summer at some point.
Yeah.
I mean, he was one pitching injury away from getting his shot this month, or, a setback by Hendricks or something. But, it does seem like we're stabilizing a little bit. Wisniewski obviously has pitched well in the 5 spot. Hendricks is coming back. We still don't have a real clear timetable on Wicks, but I mean, it's been the strength of the team, despite, a few bumps in the road here and there with Hendricks and,
sure.
Some of the injuries, but it's been really good. And we haven't even seen, the guy that's the Cubs' best pitching prospect since Mark Pryor. There's a lot of upside still to come. So.
Okay. Alex, how much of a leash do you give Kyle Hendricks when he gets back into the rotation? And who would you take out? I'm assuming Wisniewski goes into the bullpen and give Kyle maybe one last shot at keeping him spot in the rotation.
Yeah, so my leash is extremely short with him. I think if he doesn't look good, 1, 2
3 starts
at the most. I mean, if he goes out there and it's start 2 and he's coming out of start 2 and it's like a combined 10 runs, you can't. You can't do it. And I hate to like no disrespect to Kyle Hendricks. I'll always love the guy. He'll always be one of my favorite Cubs, but I almost hate messing with a good thing right now. But the good thing is that if you say, okay, Hayden Wesneski, go back to the bullpen, we'll see how this goes. At least that means, okay, you're giving the bullpen, which has struggled, another good arm. So there is a positive there. You're just in a situation where you can't really wait around. And listen, if Hayden Wesneski keeps pitching well and or Kyle Hendricks comes back and pitches fine, then the good news is too that you can really feel at ease of taking your time with Jordan Wicks, making sure he's healthy, making sure he's good to go. So you're not feeling as pressed to try to rush him back. So that is a big bonus there. I think that let's say you bring Kyle Hendricks back, and I'm going to throw out some numbers out there that I think are kind of within range of what you can hope for. Say he comes back first time, gives you 4 or 5 innings of like 2-3 runs. Okay. That's, kind of like what Michael just said, that keeps you in a game. That should keep you in a game for the first half of it. And then, maybe he comes back next start. He goes 5 or 6, 3 runs again. You're right on that cusp of being, okay, we can do this. This is fine. This is good enough.
If he pitches like a 5th starter, he's fine.
Exactly.
If he continues to be unpitchable, you gotta move on.
Right, exactly. He can't look like the end of White Sox Dallas Keuchel. And that's honestly what we've seen in his first stint this year, where you're looking at this and you're like, listen, this is not a major league pitcher right now.
Right.
A 12 plus ERA, there's, maybe it's fluky for one game, but when it's 3, 4, that's when you have to make these tough decisions. So he'll get his chance, he'll get his look. But the leash can't be very long. It just can't. And there always comes a time for a tough decision. And that tough decision might come within a month or so. Depending on when he comes back, when he's ready, how many starts he makes. But because like Michael, like you just said, there's a big difference between pitching like a 5 and just not being capable of getting more than 9-10 outs without giving up,
right.
5+ runs. Huge difference.
Mm-hmm. I mean, you can survive a pitcher that has a 6 ERA. I mean, sure. It's obviously not ideal, but a lot of teams will have a 5th starter where they got a 5 ERA, or occasionally they'll have a little bit more struggles than that. But I mean, it's a 12 ERA that he put up. That is completely unusable, and you cannot survive that. And you can survive normal struggles. That's abnormal struggles.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. We know that the Cubs minor league system, thankfully, we've touched on this a little bit on our show, is very, very deep and very, very good. At least, as much grief we give Jed Hoyer, and without a doubt, he deserves a lot of them, fair or not. But at least he's been able to put together a very, very good minor league system right now. So, it's inevitable that not all of them will not only make it to the major leagues, whether it's with the Cubs or elsewhere. Some of these players, as we've seen in the past, they are going to be blocked by the parent club and will likely be traded. So, Alex, let's start with you. Right now, when you look at the Cubs minor league system, which player do you put at the top of the trading deadline, a player that will likely be dealt? And I'm going to throw out some names right now. Right now, PCA is manning center field position, while Cody Bellinger was out. We know he doesn't hit that much, so that's a little bit of a question mark. Kevin Alcantara, I believe that the Cubs prized center fielder currently in AA was acquired in that. Correct me if I'm wrong, either from the Yankees or the Giants on that.
The Alcantara came from the Yankees in the Rizzo deal.
Oh, that's right. Thank you. So he is tearing up right now after a very slow start. So one of them will likely be maybe the center fielder of the future. Moises Ballesteros is somebody that is really, really starting to get a lot of attention. He might be a catcher, maybe like a slugging first baseman. Certainly looks the part that way. It is getting a lot of attention. Well, Andy Shaw, Double A, he's struggling a little bit, but I think he's still considered the third baseman of the future as well. James Triantos, the second baseman, that is highly regarded at Double A as well. But with the Nico Hoerner signing a new contract, he might have to certainly wait his turn. And we mentioned Cade Horton, who is the top pitching prospect in the Cubs rotation, who will likely to be in the rotation at some point this year. Alex, of all the names that I mentioned, and maybe some of the names I might have missed, who do you think that the Cubs will likely have to pony up in order to get what they want, whether it's a bat or maybe a bullpen arm?
I was thinking about this the other day, and even though he might not give you back the most value unless he's packaged in a deal, I just don't know if Canario has a future on this team, because every time he's come up, he's been on the bench, and I wanted to see more of him. I a few more at bats. We just didn't get it, and I don't know how he's going to be on this team in the future. I mean, you already have a crowded outfield. I don't think you want to trade Owen Casey at this moment necessarily, unless you're getting something really good. Obviously, I think Cade Horton and Matt Shaw feel like the two most untouchables right now, in my opinion. But I like a guy like Canario. He's not your top prospect.
Yeah.
He's not a major prospect in baseball, but he's still a prospect where I just scratch my head. Like, listen, both your major league tenures, you've been used very, very sparingly. And this is even with Craig Counsell, who likes to play some of the younger guys. I don't know. I could really see him being trade bait. And I don't know if this is a good comparison or not. I'm just kind of throwing this out there. I remember during the World Series contending years when we had Jeimer Candelario coming up, and he had a few stints with the Cubs, and it's like, he's here to fill a role, but permanently, where's the fit? And that's kind of how I feel with Canario.
Gotcha. Michael, when you look at the minor league system of the Cubs right now, who do you think that the Cubs will more than likely have to part ways in order to get what they want?
It's Alcantara.
Okay. So you're high on PCA more than Alcantara?
Well, yeah. And I mean, PCA is one of the best center fielders. I think he's going to hit. There's a little bit of Corey Patterson in him, but I mean, you look at Corey Patterson played for like 15 years in the major leagues. And PCA is a little bit better athlete, maybe a little less strong compared to Corey Patterson. But the Cubs aren't going to trade PCA, and I don't think they're going to trade Owen Casey. They want the Cubs value left-handed hitters, and they value up the middle defense, and that's PCA. Owen Casey is left-handed power that they desperately need. And so I don't expect either of those guys to be moved. And then Matt Shaw, I'm a huge fan of Matt Shaw. I think he is going to be on the team by the end of the year. I don't think he's going to be an everyday starter right away. I've kind of compared it to the way that they used Javi Baez when he first brought him up, where he started like 90 games during the 2016 season. Yeah. I think we're going to see something like that for Matt Shaw next year. And to me, I mean, Alex brought it up. I bring it up every year, like going all the way back to the previous rebuild when everybody was like, oh, we're going to trade all these shortstops and Javi Baez, we got to get him out of here right away. it was Jorge Soler. It was always Jorge Soler that was going to get traded. It was never a question in my mind, and he was the guy that got moved. And it's going to be Canario. It's going to be Alcantara. Right-handed outfielders, unless they can get in and become a starter right away, it's so difficult for them to break in. Especially for a team like the Cubs that does prize versatility. Matt Shaw can play left field. He's never done it. I guarantee you, with a few weeks, he can play left field. And if they need somebody to platoon long-term with Ian Happ over the next few years, they can either have Matt Shaw play left field, or Cody Bellinger moves out to the outfield from first base and plays, and Matt Shaw DHs, and Matt Bush plays, and Michael Bush plays first base. There's so many things that they can move around where, especially for Canario, a right-handed corner outfielder, there's no spot for that. Alcantara at least has center field. He can play center field, and I think he can play a pretty decent center field. So I wouldn't totally rule him out as a potential Cub, because, hey, say PCA really doesn't ever hit. Okay, then maybe you can eventually see Alcantara come up and replace him, but that's not my expectation. And to me, if you are looking at getting a closer, or a big piece at this deadline, you got to give up one of your top 100 prospects. And to me, it's very clearly Alcantara who is the most disposable. I guess call it
most valuable, and probably fetch a better.
Yeah. I mean, because there's still going to be a lot of teams that don't have a center field prospect like him. Whereas with the Cubs, he's their second center field prospect. So,
right. Yeah. You have to give up something to get something.
Exactly. And you did bring up Triantos as well. I think that's also another piece that they can move, because, again, I think for a lot of teams, Triantos would be, a very, maybe at the top of their second base, third base depth chart. Matt Shaw's better. I mean, he's not hitting as well as Triantos is right at this very moment, but Matt Shaw's the better player. And so, just like Alcantara has PCA blocking, it just is what it is.
Yeah, I'm curious to talk about the Owen Casey. He's obviously the one of the centerpieces in that Yu Darvish trade that looks, unfortunately, thank God for Owen Casey, because if without him, that trade is completely one-sided and completely a disaster for the Cubs. The Cubs outfield looks a little bit crowded right now moving forward, with the, Happ struggling at left, Cody Bellinger in center field, just got back from an injury, not sure if he's going to be healthy all the way this entire season. And Seiya Suzuki, who is, completing his rehab assignment in Iowa and is expected to be joining the team tomorrow. You do have a nice outfielder out there, but Alex, where do you see Casey's future with the Cubs? Do you see him as more of a left fielder replacing, or at least platooning with Happ, or do you see him as a right fielder more so?
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of something I've racked my brain about, because, I mean, you have Happ locked down for a few more years, and you assume that PCA is going to be out there in center field. If he is who we think he is, he's going to be in center field. I mean, he is your best outfielder. And, obviously Ian Happ has won a few Gold Gloves, but Ian Happ does not have the range or the speed or the athleticism that PCA has. And, Seiya Suzuki,
we might have lost Alex.
Oh, Alex kind of froze up a little bit there, but we'll wait for Alex's to get back in a little bit. But Michael, in a minute, while we wait for Alex to get back to us, what do you think of the future on Owen Casey right now?
I don't think it's a coincidence that Seiya Suzuki played some left field in spring training this year. I I think Owen Casey can play right field for the Cubs. And I think he will be the right fielder of the future. Maybe he gets some DH time, whatever. But with the acquisition of Michael Busch, and hopefully Cody Bellinger sticks around for a couple of years, that to me is the one question mark still, is when or if does Bellinger opt out. If he sticks around, I think we're in great shape where they can eventually phase Ian Happ out. I'm not overly concerned with that. Yeah, I mean, I think Casey's going to end up being the right fielder of the future a couple of years from now. He probably gets worked in a little bit next year, but I mean, PCA is going to kind of be the guy that gets worked in first.
In the center fielder position, right?
Yeah, in the center field. And then Bellinger either moves to first base or maybe they move him to left field or right field. I mean, Bellinger's Gold Glove came in right field. So, yeah, I mean, they have some options there. But, yeah, they want Casey's power potential
right
in the future of this club. I'm like 99% sure of that. I mean, there's always the chance that the right deal comes along and he's the guy you got to give up or whatever. But I truly believe he, by the end maybe of next season, he's probably going to be the right fielder.
Alex, welcome back. We lost you there for a little bit. We apologize there.
Sorry about that.
No problem. Your thoughts on the future of Owen Casey with the Cubs?
Yeah, like Michael was talking about, there's you mentioned Seiya Suzuki playing in left. I think it was very interesting you brought that up, and because I do feel like the Cubs value him quite a bit. Michael, you mentioned that lefty power. That's something they value very much, and they also value on base, and that's also something that Owen Casey gives you. So they're going to try everything they can to kind of makeshift and make this work, because you're going to have Happ on the roster next few years. You're going to have Suzuki, and the plan is for PCA to be your center fielder. So this is kind of where, okay, it's nice that there's a DH because you can kind of mix and match defensively. I mean, where you think things are going to be. And your offense too, if you want some guy in the lineup that he may play defense or be a DH. So it's going to kind of all depend on how they makeshift things, because I think that once you get into Cody Bellinger being back to play the field, if you keep PCA up, for example, and you keep him in center field, then you can have Bellinger at first, and then you DH Michael Busch when he's in the lineup, when he's playing, because I think that Morel has done a good enough job to play at third base. So it's the thought process like that where there's going to be a lot of moving parts, and the lineup's not going to be the same. The defensive lineup's not going to be the same day in, day out. And the theme of the Cubs really since Theo is just loving versatility and flexibility with a roster. Your left fielder, center fielder, right fielder, and all across the diamond, it's not going to be in the same position as it is every single day outside a number of guys. So I do think Owen Casey does have a future with this team, and it's gonna require a lot of shuffling and some mixing and matching.
Yeah, I just think you got to look back to the last rebuild. Addison Russell played every day at shortstop. Anthony Rizzo played every day at first base. That's basically it. Chris Bryant played most days in left or in third base, but he also played left field. He played right field. But he was at least another everyday player. Wilson Contreras was not an everyday player. He played backup catcher. He was the third string catcher for a while, and then played some left field.
People forget
he eventually worked into being the full-time starter. Javi Baez played third base. He played second base. He barely played shortstop until 3 years into his career, basically, when he finally took over for Russell. Albert Almora wasn't an everyday player. Schwarber was an everyday player, but he got hurt, that rookie year. But so many people are like, oh, where do they play? The Cubs, especially now that they have a DH, they didn't even have the DH last time. Jorge Soler, again, not an everyday player for the Cubs. these were top 100 prospects that the Cubs did not bring up and just insert into the lineup right away and play them every day and move veterans out of the way to allow that. Even their $120 million guy or whatever, Jason Hayward, he played center field as much as he played right field at times, because Zobrist would move from second base to right field and Hayward would shift over to left or to center.
Especially when Fowler was hurt that stretch of time.
Exactly. Yeah. So the Cubs are going to build a very similar team where, last time they kind of had like 11 starters. This time with the DH, you can almost maybe have 12. And so that's kind of where I see where it's like, okay, PCA is probably going to play center field every day, but Matt Shaw can probably start 90 games bouncing between third base, second base, DH, maybe left field, or, maybe he DHs and somebody else moves out to left field and blah, blah, blah. There's a bunch of different ways that they can roll with this. And then, of course, there's always, people are going to get hurt and, somebody's going to step in. And so, you obviously can't carry everybody. It's difficult to play more than about 11 or 12 guys. I mean, we see it already. Like the 13th player on the Cubs roster doesn't play. Like when Mastrobuoni was up, he had like 4 plate appearances in like the first 3 weeks of the season or whatever like that. It just doesn't get used very much. But the 10, 11, 12 players, they're going to have a role and they're going to make it work.
A couple more segments with Alex Patt, the writer for the cubbiescrib.com, and Michael Ernst. Gentlemen, I wanted to talk about the success of Shota Imanaga. We talked about how affordable his contract was, and he certainly has been a revelation for the Cubs. And if it hasn't been for his record, I think the Cubs were not nowhere near as good as they are right now, in spite of all the problems and everything. So, Michael, let's start with you. When you first saw Imanaga, what was your initial opinion of him, and how do you find out, if he's going to be successful and if it's sustainable or not?
Well, I mean, my first impression with Imanaga came the first time he pitched for the Cubs. I had never researched him prior, so his signing was kind of a, okay, the Cubs think that this is going to work. Their pitch profile believes that if they adjust his fastball to, get thrown up in the zone, despite that it's only 92, 93, he's got enough backspin on it and stuff where it was going to work. And I mean, obviously it has. I do think there's a little bit of luck in some of the fly ball. He's going to give up more home runs than he currently is. That's just the nature of the beast. Right. So the 160 ERA or whatever he has, nobody's going to continue to pitch to a 160 ERA unless he's the second coming of Kershaw. Right. It's just, we can't expect this level of success to be sustained. But I mean, the one thing we still can't answer is, they pitch a different amount in Japan. They don't pitch every 5 days. Right. The Cubs have been protecting him so far, where they're trying to give him 5 days rest as often as possible. And, you hope that, by the end of the season, he's still, got gas left in the tank. Right. And, you hope maybe by next year that transition, he's used to it, and maybe you don't have to protect him as much next year, but that's still a question mark. We don't know. It's essentially just hope at this point.
Alex, when did you first realize, how good he is, and, going forward, do you feel like, obviously this unbeaten string will at least come to an end at some point, but how do you like his chances, and how do you like him pitching maybe on a 4 days rest? I believe his last start was maybe on a 4 days rest or so, but do you feel like that's something that the Cubs can actually work it out without maybe losing his effectiveness?
Yeah, I mean, it's going to take some building up. I think it's going to take some getting used to for him. And, there are going to be, as we get into the summers, we get into June, July, August, those are the days when we see that warm air just howl out at Wrigley Field. And Michael, you
Right.
mentioned the fly balls. There is going to be that start where he just gets, they're just going to be hitting it off the board against him. And he's a fly ball pitcher. The one thing that has surprised me in a couple of his starts is getting more ground balls than I expected. We saw the start in Boston. He got a lot of ground balls. Now, this past start against the Padres, you saw a lot more of what you kind of expected from Imanaga, where he was getting a lot of, pop fly outs and a lot of fly balls, and not as many ground outs as we saw in some of the other starts. But, this is the time where nobody really has a book on him. And this is going to be the challenge of him going forward because, eventually you're going to have to pitch against a team again that already saw you once. And how are they going to make those adjustments? Are they going to lay off the splitter if they're able to identify the splitter out of his hand? Are they going to be able to lay off the high heat? And, he doesn't blow smoke by you, but we saw how effective he is at changing the eye level when he throws like, a splitter or a fastball down and in, and then he goes pretty much at shoulder level and tries to get the swing in. He's been very effective at that. So how teams are going to adjust to that in certain counts, and there's going to be that adjustment period, but this guy was signed for a reason. He has a very extensive resume in Japan. He started the championship game in the World Baseball Classic. You're not a nobody if you do that. So we know this guy is capable of being successful. We just know that what he's doing right now is insane. And we do have to be prepared for the adjustment coming back time because baseball is a game of constant adjustments and teams are going to get more of the book on him. And those fly balls, there's going to be days where, in June, if that wind is really howling out, it's going to look like a normal fly out, and then that thing's just going to sail out. So that is coming. But I think overall, he can sustain being very, very good. We should be very lucky, consider ourselves very lucky we have a guy like this because his personality is great. His competitive edge is fantastic. His confidence out there, you see the body language. If there was like an official test for that, in my opinion, he passed with flying colors in terms of that kind of confidence and kind of the mojo he has on the mound. So he's got all the tools to be really, really good. And if he keeps the head on his shoulders and he counter adjusts and keeps working to adversity, then he's going to continue to be successful.
And he's funny.
He's very funny.
That's true.
And he's got the nickname of the philosopher. So you'd like to think that he's going to be able to make those adjustments when the time comes. I mean, he's already adjusted. I mean, he's mentioned it before where, the strike zone is different here. He does have to throw the fastball higher here than he did in Japan. I mean, he's already made multiple adjustments. And, we see how effective it is. And so there are going to be bumps in the road, but like Alex was saying, I mean, the competitive edge, the concentration, he's not walking anybody, which is great. I mean, he's, it's just, that's the full package so far. And I fully expect him to remain at least a top half of the rotation starter for the length of this contract, which is, God, that contract's awesome.
It's so good. It's so good.
That's good. And I'll say this as a Japanese American who lived in Japan and followed baseball over there. I wasn't really aware of Imanaga's personality, but it's so nice to see, him being very, very expressive and has really, really embraced the Chicago culture and has really, well received. And it's actually very, very nice to see that. It also helps that certainly he has really adjusted well and has been lights out for the Cubs. So it's really, really nice because a lot of times, if you've seen with Seiya Suzuki, struggling up until last year until he got benched by David Ross in the summer, and that's when he finally clicked and turned it on. And started to put up a real good number to finish out last season, and he got off to a real hot start before the rib injury unfortunately sidelined him again, which has unfortunately become like a habit of sorts. But it's really nice to see that the Cubs, with their history, not so good history of Asian baseball players, Isop Choi, Kosuke Fukudome,
Fujikawa, remember him?
Yeah, Fujikawa, Koji Uehara, toward his end of his career, and so forth. So
Darvish seems to be the guy that turned everything around.
Yeah.
He's the guy that helped recruit Suzuki. Can't say highly enough of what Darvish I think has potentially meant to this organization.
Darvish is like God in the among the not just those who play here in America, but also what he has meant to some of these younger players in Japan who has an aspiration, obviously to pitch, whether with him or somewhere else. Obviously, his advice, he's very, very active on social media. He's always more than happy to give advice to his fellow countrymen, and which obviously a lot of them grew up watching him or at least compete with him. So I think that influence, as you mentioned, guys, is very, very well known, and there's no question that I think the impact of Darvish cannot be overlooked. I wish he was still with the Cubs. There's no question about it.
And I hope the Cubs can keep the momentum going. There's more great Japanese players that are expected to be, coming across the pond the next couple of years. So,
that's true. Well, it helps that I believe they're playing Dodgers next year in Tokyo, as rumored to be.
Yes.
So I think that would certainly help, get more attention. There's no question that Ohtani, unfortunately, and rightfully so, he gets all the attention, and they certainly deserve it because of the numbers he's crazy numbers he's put up so far, and the fact that he has pitched and hit at a remarkable rate. So, but I think that the time when Cubs will get their dues, or at least attention, is just around the corner as well. Guys, I wanted to kind of finish out with some of the reports that came out about A's reliever Mason Miller. I know Ken Rosenthal just posted about A's wanting a lot in return, and there's no question he is one of their few, if not the only tradable and valuable asset that they have on that organization right now. But Michael, let's start with you. If A's ask for, say, Shaw, Alcantara, and even Horton or Wicks as a like a package to build around, would you say yes or no to that deal?
All of those guys? No, absolutely not. I'm not giving up that much for a closer. I mean,
he is young, though.
He is very young. I mean, the A's have every right to ask for the best prospects in any organization. But the Cubs do have a better farm system than most, and so whereas other teams might have to give up their first and their third and their fifth best prospect. In the Cubs case, they're not giving up all, three guys like that for anyone, let alone a closer.
Mm-hmm. Alex, I'm assuming that you would also say no, right?
Yeah, I would have to say no. I mean, would I love to have a guy like him in our bullpen? Who wouldn't? I watch him. I'm like, man, I would love this guy on the Cubs so much, so freaking much. If somebody gave me a magic wand, okay, that's a good trade. Just magically transport him on the Cubs roster. And he's got like a negative FIP. He's putting up numbers that are like breaking advanced stats. And you're doing something right when you're doing that. But the fact that he's young, the fact that he's so good, and a big fact to his his value too is the cost control. That's a really big factor in as well. So
yeah,
the A's will be, if they do entertain a trade, they will be asking for the solar system for him. And
right.
like Michael
That's
said,
true.
rightfully so, rightfully so. When you have someone who's putting up historic numbers so far and is under that type of club control, yeah, you want to be rebuilding your farm system with that asset right then and there. And I do want to take a moment to say, I'm not saying it's sustainable, but the A's they're playing some pesky solid baseball right now. And
They are,
you know,
yeah.
I mean, going to the season, a lot of people thought, okay, they're probably going to be in the bottom 3 or 4. And, by season's end, they're not going to look spectacular, I don't think, but give them credit for playing some really competitive ball so far. It feels like a combination of Moneyball and Major League. Obviously, Moneyball applies because that was the true story of the Oakland A's. And then Major League, here's the owner that doesn't give a shit about the fans, the team, and, creating this bad roster as possible. And here they are being competitive. So it's kind of fun to watch. And I think it's a real shame that a historic and important sports franchise has to go through this, because the A's are a proud historic franchise and they've been around for so long. Their brand in American sports is iconic, and this isn't some expansion team that came in the 90s or the early 2000s. The A's have been around for a century plus, and they're very important in the history of baseball and North American sports. So to see a franchise like that go through this, it's awful to see. It's truly awful to see. The city deserves better. The fan deserves better. And frankly, it's a stain on the game of baseball, because you shouldn't let a important, proud, historic franchise that has the historic significance go through that. You really, it shouldn't happen.
And it's really unfortunate too that a lot of the A's problems trace back to a very kind gesture one made in the interest of baseball, where in the late 80s the A's ceded territorial rights to the South Bay, San Jose, all that kind of stuff, to the Giants, so that the Giants could use that as leverage to get a stadium built in San Francisco. The Giants wanted to threaten to move to the South Bay, and that's how they ended up getting their very, nice new park that they have had so much success with. And, the A's essentially helped them do that and then never got the rights back. And that, has really put them in a difficult situation where, it was just like 5-10 years later where the regional sports networks really blossomed and the value of those territorial rights exploded. That they never got those back is, kind of a lot of where this stems from. But the one thing I would circle back on Miller is I have seen some stuff. He's not somebody that I'm hugely familiar with, but there does seem to be some medical concern with him that I've seen surface. And, you always got to worry about any reliever throwing 104 miles an hour or whatever the heck he throws on a regular basis. I would be wary of giving up too much for somebody like that. Obviously, if he's healthy and, I think he's got the 5 years of control, obviously that's a huge win, but there's still a lot of risk involved in that. Because he's not a guy, from what I understand, that's stayed healthy throughout his minor league career, and there's been even still some concern as he's been a major leaguer. So,
wow, that's true. That's true. Well, it will be interesting to see how far the Cubs will go moving forward. They have the Pirates. They have to face Paul Skeens, the rookie, on Saturday.
That's gonna be fun.
That's an interesting game. Then you face the Braves, 6 times within a week or so. That's an interesting game as well. If the Cubs can actually keep up with the Braves, who lead the NL East once again.
And let me just say, if the Cubs end up dropping below 500 here, a few weeks from now, Please don't everybody freak out.
I pray it's not the end of the world.
It's a baseball season. It's a freaking long season. And
Right.
yeah, I mean, they've barely gotten into the NL Central schedule. They are going to trade for some relievers, even if Alzolay and some of these other guys start pitching better. They're still going to go out and get reinforcements for the bullpen. The team is going to be better in the second half than they are now. And I do think, there are probably a few wins. Everybody says, oh, if they had a bullpen, they'd have a few extra wins. There's been some luck involved in some of their wins as well.
True.
I honestly don't think that their record is actually a little bit better right now than their team, considering the injuries and the schedule that they've played. I think the Cubs are lucky to be where they're at, not just, I don't think it should be looked at as a disappointment at where the Cubs are at right now. And
well, the Pythagorean win kind of shows you that combine the good luck, the bad luck, you're kind of where you are.
I guess I haven't looked at their Pythagorean, and so but I wouldn't be surprised if it's a couple of wins lower than what they're currently at. So, yeah, I look at this as this has been a highly successful first month of the season, and I don't get the impression that many people share my view of that.
Well, I mean, they blow so many games. So
I understand that the nature of the losses that they've had is disheartening, but to me, Kyle Hendricks giving up 6 runs in 4 innings is the same type of loss as your closer blowing a lead in the 9th. And, your offense getting 1 infield hit is the same as your bullpen blowing it. But for whatever reason, that those late losses really seem to fester in the minds of people. And there's a million ways to lose baseball games.
Yeah.
And I just anyway, that's always been my view, is that people really focus too much on the bullpen sometimes when,
Well, I'm guilty for being one of those guys for sure. There's no question about it. But I really appreciate that both of you gentlemen for coming on tonight and different time zones and everything. Make sure to follow Michael and also Alex on Twitter, as you can see scrolling down below, for their insights on Cubs and baseball in general. Gentlemen, I really appreciate you coming on tonight. Hopefully we get to do it again with both of you guys are available simultaneously. We might do it again sometime in July when the trade deadline comes closer, and about 2 months or so, we will have a better idea where the Cubs are right now for starting rotation, bullpen. Hopefully everybody's healthy. The bat is alive and well, with Bellinger and Suzuki back in the lineup as well. Guys, thank you so much for coming on tonight to discuss about the Cubs, and enjoy your baseball season. And I look forward to having both of you, or at least maybe one of you down the road, to discuss further more. Thank you very much for your time tonight.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
And we look forward to having you on the next episode of the Double A Team podcast. Have a great week, everybody.